근데?
네, 이거 눈을 놓고 있는.
아, 오케이. 지금 녹화되고 있는 거지.
Hi, fellow iGymers. Your team HAFS-Korea, and our project name is the Corns of Red. Before starting our presentation, we would like to perform a short skit. So, enjoy the show. How much is this pork?
Of which $18.40.
It was $10 last week. I'm gonna come back when the price drops. Can I have some popcorn, please?
Popcorn. It's 20 bucks.
What? Popcorn for 20 bucks? Really? Oh man, already out of gas? Ethanol? I think I've heard of this before in one of those friendly Earth Day campaigns, but I never actually thought of using it before.
You know, ethanol fuel's been around for a couple of years, you didn't know?
Who's messing with my precious cornfields? Is that you, lady? Is that you?
Yeah.
Well, explain.
I just thought your coins were really pretty, yes.
You thought my corns are really pretty. Do you know how much that corn worth?
I didn't know corns were that valuable.
That valuable. Look, the ethanol fuel industry gives me loads of money for those corns. Now, lady, look, if you don't take right immediate action with cash, I'm gonna take all of this into legal action on all this complicated stuff until, you know, well.
Wait. What does the fuel industry have anything to do with corn?
Duh. The fuel industry hailed as the new future fuel replacing the petroleum industry. Apparently I don't know how that works, but well, they're paying me loads of money for that, so that's all fine for me.
Well, here's your money. And what about corn as food? I mean, I thought that's what it was supposed to be for.
Corns as food. Well, I don't care about that. I mean, as long as I get the money, well, that's everything for me, you know. That's all enough.
Oh, so that's why everything related to corn was so expensive. Corn is used both for food production and fuel production, but as corn is used for the fuel industry increases, the amount of corn that's available for the food market decreases. I gotta tell this to Alex. Hey Alex. Yeah, okay, bye.
So, what exactly is this problem with corns?
Well, I'll tell you. $820, $330, and $84. How are these numbers related? 820 million megatons of corn is produced around the world each year. Of these, 330 million megatons of corn is used for ethanol fuel production, which is about 40% of the original production of corn. And 84 is the approximate increase in the price of corn throughout the past 10 years. So why has this been happening? Well, corn is distributed to the fuel industry, which produces ethanol fuel as a source of energy for automobiles. There are two perspectives. First, the perspective of farmers and the perspective of industries. In the perspective of farmers, farmers worldwide can earn more income through working in biofuel plantations rather than selling their own products of corn to food markets. Therefore, they choose to work in these plantations. In the perspective of industries, they can earn profits from producing ethanol fuel especially in today's society where ethanol fuel is perceived as a bio-friendly renewable source of energy. So the consumption rate rises. Now, as the demand of ethanol fuel rises, so does the price of ethanol, and to match this equilibrium, the supply of ethanol fuel rises. Here, the starch inside of corn is a great ingredient for producing ethanol fuel. Thus, corn becomes a major attraction for fuel industries. But as corn enters the fuel industries, corn that can actually be used for food products in the food market decreases, which means that the supply for these markets decreases, and thus the price of corn rises. So, 820 million megatons of corn are produced each year. But as the price rises by 84%, those who depend on corn as a necessity are driven to starvation. Our team based our theme on John Steinbeck's novel, The Grapes of Wrath. You may ask, what is the correlation? Well, in Grapes of Wrath, the main idea here is that poor people are victimized because of the industrial structure. Now, we believe that this message directly applies to our current society and the industrial structure of biofuel production, because 1 billion people starve each day, even though ethanol fuel is currently increasing as a major fuel source. We think that these problems will continue if a solution is not provided, considering that ethanol fuel's usage is continuing to rise. So we say that for a solution, we would like to use the inedible portions of corn rather than the edible portions of corn. We believe that the usage of corn itself is not a problem, but rather the methodology in addressing the issue. Therefore, we propose the use of cellulose.
So, this is all because of corns.
Aha! The corns! The wonderful, fascinating source of ethanol fuel, right?
A corn can talk?
Oh, don't get too surprised. Let me make this clear. It's not that the corn itself, or should I call myself, is source of the problems. You guys don't recognize the core point.
So what is the point?
Well, a corn consists of two parts. Edible parts, which is the corn kernels, and the inedible parts, which are the cellulose part, the corn stover. Now, the problems that you've been all talking about arises from usage of only the edible parts.
So why don't they use the inedible parts? It could stabilize the food market.
Well, I guess there are some limitations in technology.
Synthetic biology. Yes, there are certain limitations to technology, but if the technology has been improved and if this improvement continues, it can solve the worldwide problem.
Okay, so we're in the lab.
Yeah, we're in the lab.
So what do we do?
So, as I previously said, the limit of technology is stopping us from using edible parts as food and inedible parts as fuel. But technology can develop. How can we innovate the situation? First, we need to focus on the corn stover, the inedible part of corn. Corn stover is the most abundant crop residue readily available today, and it provides 1.3 billion tons of raw materials that could produce future fuel in the next 50 years. The corn stover mainly consists of lignocellulose, a cellulose coated by lignin. Cellulose is a polymer composed of glucose monomers. In order to get ethanol from cellulose, the first step, which is the most important as well as the most difficult step, is to break this bond. This is where the cellulase hydrolysis occurs mostly by certain bacteria and fungi. If this is as easy as it sounds, how come the industries are not turning the corn stover into the fuel using these enzymes? Well, there are certain limitations that I want to address. First, Most of the microorganism intake cellulose and break it down in the cell, converting into glucose, which is directly used as a food source for those microorganisms. On the other hand, only a very small number of microorganisms uses cellulase on the outer membrane to break down cellulose separate from the cell. This method is more efficient when it comes to actually extracting the ethanol as the fuel, because the product glucose is not used as a direct food source of the microorganism, thus easier for us to extract glucose and convert it again to ethanol ultimately. Second limitation. There is no optimal organism in nature that are both adaptable to diverse environment and both able to produce cellulase efficiently. Comparing the two types of microorganisms that break down cellulose, bacteria have higher growth rate and less limitation in the environment, while fungi is way more capable of extracellular hydrolysis mentioned previously. Then how can we overcome this limitation? Well, this is where synthetic biology comes in. Let's design a new E. coli named E. coli that has genes from a fungi named Trichoderma rhizae. E. coli has two main advantages. First, it is the best adaptable organism in the world for any bioreactor that uses the organisms to produce ethanol. Secondly, it has strong resistance to ethanol itself. On the other hand, Trichoderma rhizae is the best cellulase producing organism in the world. The gene for cellulase in the Trichoderma rhizae genome, which is called BGL1, is highly efficient in producing cellulase. Then how does this solve the limitation? Well, as we refer back to the dilemma of bacteria and fungi, and each of those microorganisms have their own advantage, we'd like to propose a new solution to this problem, which is to merge each good aspects of bacteria and fungi through synthetic biology. We're able to benefit from the adaptability and the fast-growing nature of E. coli and the efficient production of cellulase of Trichoderma rhizae. So in order to doing this, we propose a mechanism that we created, and then we constructed this two constructs. Construct 1 consists of these 3 genes extracted from E. coli, and we ligated them to create construct 1, and then we also created construct 2, which is extracted from the direct genome of Trichoderma rhizae, and then we ligated those two to come up with a final product, which is later transformated into E. coli. The first step in creating a construct comprised of E. coli gene set, signal gene, LPP gene, and OPA genes, which stand for outer membrane protein, consist of these sequences. And the second construct consists of the whole entire gene of Trichoderma rhizae BGL1. So this is how it goes. We inserted these 3 genes into this PET28A vector, and then we also inserted BGL1 gene cut it by the same restriction enzyme, which is NCO1 and HINT3, and then we ligated that vector into the parts basket. So this would be the results of the experiments. Then after we ligated that, we extracted that, and then we transformated that into an E. coli, which is the final product, which will express cellulase in the outer membrane by the help of the LPP-OPA complex. So the final product was an E. coli that is able to break down cellulose via cellulase in the outer membrane surface, which is highly efficient, and this overcomes the limitation presented above.
So this is where my part comes in. So apparently this is where my part comes in, for the future application. Now, first of all, we need to take a quick glance of the past to see how this is applicable to actual process. So we've come up with an E. coli that can break down cellulosic materials into sugar, into glucose. But this itself does not solve the problem directly away. So we thought of how does our project enhance the previous cellulosic ethanol plants? So from this great article from PC Badger, which summarized this was pretty much our, say, resource for the overall study, to this actually functioning cellulosic ethanol power plant, which was built in 2004, exactly a year ago from this moment in Nevada. There were many attempts to build a cellulosic ethanol power plant. So there were two. We have found out that there are mainly two aspects, enzymatic and acid hydrolysis, to break down the cellulose into glucose or glucose into ethanol. So let's first take a quick glance at the acid hydrolysis. So this is mainly the process, how the basic process goes. But what we actually need to focus is this part. 237 degrees Celsius for a really short time. So this actually takes this into a faster industrial grade, but the problem is that it only has about 50% of retrieval rate. So these technical difficulties are solved when another method, the acid hydrolysis method, is used, where 90% of retrieval rate is possible, but it still needs a relatively high temperature and also requires 2 to 6 hours of the process involved. So keeping such high temperature for such a long time is where the industrial fallacy comes in. So acid hydrolysis is overall having these problems, which high temperature and low industrial efficiency. At the same time, you also need to choose amongst these two problems, low retrieval rate or slow process. Simply put, acid hydrolysis is apparently not the possible solution for the future cellulosic ethanol bioethanol production. So, enzymatic hydrolysis, or the solution that we actually are in the process of solving. So enzymatic hydrolysis also takes a very similar process, but first requires external cellulose supply. This is the conventional method. Requires an external cellulose supply, the external enzymes, and actually to our research there are many industries that actually focuses on only supplying these enzymes. Cellulose to sugar hydrolysis using yeast, and then distillation. So here's the problem, obviously. The problem is the high cost of producing enzymes, and at the same time using enzymes takes up too much time. So this is the diagram of our design. Say how applying our E. coli can solve the problem suggested in previous methods. So obviously, for now, we could not think of any other methods to break down the lignin crystalline structures. So, well, this is just for immediate solution: sulfuric acid lignin treatment, and then we'll detoxify and dry the cellulosic matters. We put E. coli and yeast into a single tank. This is actually suggested in many other papers before, though at the first time when we came up with this wasn't known to us. But we thought that we could simultaneously perform the yeast fermentation and the E. coli saccharification at the same time. Now, the reason why this method was impossible to imply in the previous methods was because primarily the bioorganisms that produce enzymes are mostly say fungi like Trichoderma ricei that we have actually used in our project. They live at temperatures of 25 degrees Celsius approximately, cold earth I'd call it. And Yeast lives at way higher temperatures, up to 35 degrees Celsius, and these temperature differences makes it impossible for yeast and E. coli to perform in the same tank, which means that it needs to first get through the trichoderma rhesae and get dissolved by cellulase, and then take all the process down to E. coli. This is where the inefficiency used to come in, but by using the E. coli, which is highly adaptable and actually performs in similar temperature with these, we believe that this problem was possible, this problem was solved, and therefore the simultaneous fermentation saccharification is possible in our scenario. So these should be the benefits. Enzymes need not be produced in separate chamber, co-saccharification and fermentation is possible, and can be linked with other similar projects. Thank you.
Coming.
So I think I need to get down here. As I previously mentioned, there are actually commercial grade performing cellulosic ethanol power plants, and it's not given in the PowerPoint though, but they actually perform this way. Say, the farmers in the surrounding local area in Nevada, after collecting all the corns, the leftover stovers are rolled in like in some form of waste, industrial waste, and then it is separately. So they were normally collected previously as waste. We're just taking that process into another power plant. That should be it, and that's how the thing in Nevada also performs.
That's really interesting that you should mention. First of all, thank you for a very nice presentation. What about, you talked about the influence of the price of corn on going to the movies and having popcorn while you're there, or buying gas. But what about using the leftovers when you harvest the corn for silage for animal feed?
So, for animal feed, say,
Often farmers gather, after they've harvested the corn, they gather the green materials, they put it into a fermenter, they let it ferment for a while, and they feed it to animals as feed.
So for which types of animals? Bovine or
Pigs,
cows and pigs?
horses.
So what you're telling me is they also eat the corn stovers at the same time, like haze, like how they eat haze. Well, we did not yet think of that, but as our main theme was corns of rat, which comes from the novel Graves of Rat, which talks about the dehumanization under the industrial or the capitalistic social system. Well, we believe that talking about cows and pigs were a secondary problem too, though they're remotely related all to each other, because we also eat cows and pigs too.
That's right, and the price of beef and pork will go up with the price of the food that they eat.
At the same time, well, we've also found out that, say, the increase in the demand for bioethanol in the previous methods where they did not use cellulosic ethanol mainly as the source of ethanol, only the corn starch ethanol. The problem of pork and beef price increasing already did happen. So we believe that we could also at the same time solve that problem, because that problem was prevalent before the cellulosic ethanol.
Thank you guys. Who's your illustrator?
Actual illustrator is back in Korea.
Well, great job. I really enjoyed it. It was very fun to watch that and your presentation, the costumes, the skit. It was great. So thank you. It was very entertaining. I have a wiki question. If you could point me on here, maybe I can't see it. I know you guys have done a lot of research because I can see a lot of data about the problem and solutions. Where, like, did you cite any articles at all, anywhere?
So the citation while uploading the wiki, we actually had the citation gathered somewhere, but yes, while uploading the wiki, well, we had a technical problem and the citations at the below, it was an image and the image was not uploaded.
Were they on the PowerPoint or are they on the poster? Is there somewhere I can see the citations in any of the three pieces?
No, currently not.
That's okay.
Oh, well, I'm amazed. First of all, nice presentation. It's very motivating for kids your age, and for us, of course. The question is, did you grow corn in Korea? Or because I was listening that there's some project in Nevada, so how do you relate with that? Did you grow corn in Korea?
We don't actually have.
Why?
I think you were sort of asking what motivated us to actually start with the corns, and it's not that the corn usage is not as prevalent as in United States as in Korea. So the reason why we chose corn because is that we're actually we are from an international course in which studies the subjects in all English, and we get to learn about United States culture and the history a lot of the times. And we learn, while we're learning, that we get to get access to this kind of literature, the Grapes of Wrath, and while learning the history and the economic structure of the United States, we actually came to have this problem, and why is this happening in some countries that we're all familiar about, we're all studying about. So this sort of motivated us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well.
Oh, sure. Just a quick question. So relating to the earlier question, I didn't see anything in the PowerPoint about human practices or outreach. So I wonder if you could just quickly summarize or point me to how you gathered information about the corn industry and its effects, and just how did you engage with the community?
So we actually did a number of activities. They weren't really large scale, but we raised campaigns nearby universities and the nearby cafes, with posters that sort of listed out the problems that we thought were occurring in current society and the methods we would use to address these problems. We also interviewed passerbys and tried to see what they thought about the current technology of bioengineering and how they viewed the usage of corn and how they would.
We have to ask you
Yes.
to talk to them after and have you visit the poster because we got to get the next team set up. But thank you so much for your presentation. Very nice.
Thank you so much for listening.